With the World Health Assembly quickly approaching, reports indicate that the WHO may be taking steps to water down their proposed pandemic treaty to appease critics. However, the agreement is still a threat to national sovereignty, free speech, intellectual property rights, and your family's health. As I discussed yesterday, this comes as both the United Kingdom and Slovakia have already announced they will not be signing the treaty. Now, closer to home, Republicans in both chambers of Congress have introduced legislation to protect American sovereignty by establishing that any pandemic-related convention or agreement reached by the World Health Assembly be considered a treaty, which is what it is, which would require the advice and the consent of the Senate. But they're calling it an accord as opposed to a treaty to circumvent the Senate. Joining me now to discuss this, Congressman Tom Tiffany, who introduced this legislation in the House, which now has more than 50 Republican co-sponsors. He serves on the House Judiciary Committee and the House Committee on Natural Resources. He represents the 7th Congressional District of Wisconsin. Congressman Tiffany, welcome to Washington Watch.
Tony, it's good to join you today.
So give us the latest on your legislation and what it would do.
H.R. 1425, the No WHO bill, is gaining steam, Tony. Every Republican senator has signed on to this bill. We started out with 14 co-signers on the bill, a couple months ago. We are now up to 51 members of the House of Representatives that have signed on. So it continues to grow in that way. And it's very heartening to hear what you just had to say, that the UK and Slovakia are saying, we're not going to sign on to this. I hope our negotiators that represent the United States see the wisdom of that and back off from trying to do this accord, as you call it.
Now, your legislation, as I understand it, would simply require that before this could be binding on the United States, as any international treaty would require, that the Senate has to ratify this. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate, Tony. And that's how it should be. I mean, if we're going to sign an international agreement that is basically a treaty for all intents and purposes, it should have to go through a treaty vote, which requires a 2/3 supermajority by the United States Senate in order to ratify. And especially when you see what happened during the pandemic, when the WHO was warned by Taiwan in late 2019, funny stuff was going on in a lab in Wuhan, China, and the WHO ignored those warnings as well as other things that they've done. We should not be entering into international accords with a corrupt organization that serves at the behest of communist China.
Let me ask you this question, Congressman Tiffany, and I'm serious, because if you can point to something, I'd like to see it. Is there anything that the WHO did during the COVID pandemic that was useful?
I don't think there was a thing. I mean, they fostered this whole notion of, think about all the things that have been discredited since the whole pandemic policy, whether it's masking, whether it's social distancing, just the jabs that are proving to be having side effects that are affecting people across the world, countries that most of their population did not take the shots, and they have far fewer side effects as a result of countries that mass vaccinated, much like the United States and Western Europe. And the WHO was on the forefront of all of those things. I don't think there was a single thing that they did that was helpful. But that's to be expected from an organization that believes that there should be a one world order.
Let me ask you about that, Congressman, because that's I have multiple levels of concern here. Number one, you're absolutely right. I cannot find a single thing that the WHO did correctly. As you pointed out earlier, they covered for China, basically wasting 30 days, allowing the world to respond to COVID. Then they are advocating in this accord the silencing of free speech. They want the 194 member states that would be a part of this to suppress speech, like the Biden administration did on social media, which has gone to the Supreme Court and been challenged. But underlying all of this is something you just touched on. I'm very concerned that this could be a precursor to one world governance, because there is power with this given to the WHO to declare global health emergencies, and then the power to enforce the provisions that are in this accord.
Yeah, and we're seeing more and more of that over the last couple decades, where people in America and administrations like the Biden administration, that they want to sign on to these international accords that serve as the rule of law for the United States of America. It breaches our sovereignty. And Tony, I just think, as you mentioned in the run-up, I sit on the Natural Resources Committee. We see the same thing there, where they're saying we have to sign on to these international climate accords and various things like that. It breaches American sovereignty. We should not go down that path, because you end America, the rule of law, private property rights, and the founding ideals that made this the shining city on the hill for over 200 years. It ends all of that when we have to be dependent on the governance of this international body. And remember who's going to be driving this. It'll be countries like communist China. It will be Iran. It'll be Russia. It'll be totalitarian countries that will drive this.
Congressman, I know that you're going to have to run to vote for just a minute. They're calling votes here, but I want to switch topic here for just a moment. Well, first, before we move to this next final topic, what can people do to help with your bill?
Encourage your representative to get aboard HR 1425, no WHO. And it's Congressman Tiffany's bill in the House of Representatives. We have every senator on board. But contact your elected representatives. Tell them to get on that bill so that we are not subject to the whims of international accords that are driven by countries like communist China.
And folks, to make it easy, you can text WHO to 67742, and we'll have a link there for you. In the Justice Committee, the Attorney General Merrick Garland has refused to turn over information that the Congress has requested. Will there be contempt charges brought against the Attorney General?
We're going to debate that tomorrow in the Judiciary Committee, and I expect that to come out of committee, that we should have a contempt proceeding that continues, because this should be about sunlight for the American people. The American people can handle the truth. And all we're asking for is show the recordings that Special Counsel Hur did with President Biden. Let's see them. The Department of Justice will not release those tapes at this point, and they should release them so that the American people can see what Joe Biden, exactly what he said when he was testifying before the Special Counsel Hur.
Why do you believe they're refusing to release these?
Oh, it's hide the ball. It's what they've consistently been doing. This is a game of rope-a-dope that has been going on through this entire session of Congress, Tony, where we ask for information and then we have to ramp it up in order for people to comply. This includes the FBI Director Wray, and where we just have to steadily threaten greater consequences in order to provide the information. I think we ultimately will get this information because it should not be kept secret.
And this is, I know the Republicans don't have a lot of, in terms of the majority, they don't have a lot of seats to work with. I mean, you've just got a few seats, but this is one of the key tools in the toolbox right now, is to have these oversight hearings and to do what you can to hold the Biden administration accountable. So I commend you for using those. And I also commend you, Congressman, for leading this effort against the WHO and understanding the threat this is to our nation's sovereignty. And I do know you need to go and vote. They're holding a vote right now. And I want to thank you for taking time to join us, Congressman Tiffany, and always great to see you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on, Tony.